Welcome to Psychic Holistic Spotlight. I'm your host, Josie Way. Co-hosting with me tonight is Kathy Medeiros, and Joe Higgins is co-hosting, and he is a guest because he's brought his friend and I believe you could call protege, helping along with mediumship, Brian Flanagan. I'm going to let Joe tell you about how he met Brian, and from there, we are going to open up into a discussion of developing spirituality, mediumship, mentorship, a little of everything. Thank you. Joe?
Well, I'd like to, we're honored to have Brian Flanagan here tonight. And Brian's a retired police officer, and he is finishing up on his first book called The Path, What a 5-Year-Old's Death Taught a Police Officer About Life in the Spirit World. So we'll be asking Brian some questions about his spiritual connections and how it worked when he was working with the police department. And so it should be very fascinating. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of get right into it, because I know Josie and Kathy have some questions for Brian.
Yeah.
And Brian, could you just give us a brief background of how long you were a police officer and what made you decide that you finally had to write a book, or that you should write a book?
I'm going to even go back a little further.
Okay.
I've been a police officer, retired after 23 and a half years. Went to school actually for accounting up in Rhode Island here, and a year and a half later, I'm a police officer. My mentor coming out of high school was my accounting teacher, so I would come back from college and have lunch with him on several occasions. As fate would have it, I get hired on Halloween. The first person I do CPR on in my career is my mentor, the accounting teacher.
Ooh.
And then from there, it
gets weirder than that?
It just gets weirder from that, yeah. A lot of things started happening, but it wasn't until my mother, growing up, never told me some things that I didn't find out until later on in life.
Right. Like what?
I guess one morning or one day I was in a room playing by myself and came out.
Go on.
Came out and I guess was saying there was somebody in the room.
Right.
With her, or with me, and her and a girlfriend went into the room, that some woman was talking to me.
Right.
In the room. And I even to this day, I go back through the story, and she thought, as most kids are at that age, and she
Right.
said, well, you weren't that type of a kid. So, she thought I was going to be a priest when I got older.
Right. They all do.
Ended up a priest.
And then we disappoint them.
And became a cop, yeah.
Well, it's either a cop or a priest, right?
One or the other.
Or a part-time bartender, right? But so they kind of realized that, did you realize at an early age that you had
no clue?
That certain things were happening, or you just kind of said, oh, it was just a synchronicity or a chance?
When my grandmother was going to pass, I knew that she was going to pass. And I'm not a lovey-dovey. I was more introverted, but not really lovey-dovey. But the day that she died, I went into her room in the morning and gave her a kiss and said, I love you, to her. And we kind of talked about baseball out in the hallway. And so she had passed that afternoon. And that I was pulled out of baseball practice that afternoon and never played ball again. And like I said, my grandfather played against Babe Ruth. So baseball is huge in my family.
Right.
Never picked up a ball after that.
Now, you said that you knew kind of, was it like a gut feeling that she was going to pass?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know some people, Kathy, some people just have that psychic ability. And some people are just more finely tuned. I think that's what kind of Brian,
I know some of us can tell better than others, though, 'cause, sometimes I can tell that when the soul's getting ready to separate.
Right.
And I believe that's what he was picking up on, too, though, when, the cord that touches the body to the soul, though, was starting to separate.
Right. So he was picking up that at an earlier age.
Yeah.
but I had no clue that I was picking up. I just
Right, it was just
You just
natural.
knew.
I was just
Yeah.
Or,
some of us
or
just
that
know
it was
things.
unusual. You had no clue.
right.
Well, a lot
At
of
the
times
time.
when we, as children, we start to develop, or even when we become teens, these events happen in our lives, and until we talk to other people, we don't realize that it's a little bit more than the average person having some type of psychic experience, like, knowing, the phone rings and you know who it is, or
Yeah.
you think about someone you haven't seen them in 6 months and then you see them the next day. I mean, we all have these psychic abilities, but in certain circumstances with certain people, they seem to be a little bit more finely tuned. And I think, so that's kind of like what your book is about your path and your awareness of these gifts that begin to open up throughout your career and life.
Right, pretty much. It really wasn't until I was involved in a domestic where somebody pulled a handgun on me that it really jarred all of this stuff.
So when you became a police officer, and did some of these psychic events that it happened while you were working, some of the things?
Yes. Got off, where it started was I had a god-awful feeling like the world was going to end. 2 weeks later, I ended up in a police-involved shooting. And I had no idea that was coming, but I realized that after the event ended, that feeling was gone. And then in speaking about this, then my mother tells me about some things that were going on when I was a kid, but
So now you're starting to put like different things together, saying, is there something here, or am I just kind of like making things up?
Right.
So did you become more aware of your environment more so than a regular, police officers are very intuitive about their environment, but did you start to feel like, there's certain things that just kind of go above this?
I think like as I got in a little bit further in my career, I became more aware of it. I think probably a good 10 years of my career, I really had no clue.
Okay.
Because I think that the shooting was about, the police involved shooting was probably about 10 years into the career. What started the whole catalyst of everything, which is what the book is about, 2 years into my career, I was one street away, was working alone in a 40 square mile town, and a house fire came in, and I was literally one street away. And when I got there, fully engulfed house fire, electrical wires zipping all over the lawn, and I saw a father trying to reach into the house to get his son. I went into the house, and it was like a movie. Things were on fire, and I'm standing at the base of the stairs thinking, there's no way I'm going to get up. There's no way I'm going to get upstairs. And I heard a whooshing noise. And I had to make a decision. I thought that was a gas grill, like the propane, like when you're trying to light a gas grill, it won't light, and all of a sudden you hit a whooshing noise.
Right, like the woof, yeah.
So this event actually happened prior to the shooting, and so I heard that, and it wasn't until realizing, having awareness of what all this is about, and going back down to talk to the family, they didn't even have any propane stuff there. They had no gas grill there. So then it's like, well, so then I'm more aware of what I was, like I'm more aware today of what I was listening to.
Yeah.
So when you heard that, did you feel like you had to get out of the house, or just to make a decision?
Yes.
That
right then and there, make a decision, get out. And I looked, I said, there's no way I'm going to get upstairs. There's no way. And I lived with that for a long while, because it's a 5-year-old boy.
you felt guilty about it?
Absolutely.
But you just knew at that moment that it was just an impossible thing.
Right, and I thought, I thought it was just a gas grill, and then the shooting happened. That enormous feeling I was getting.
Would you have it before the shooting? Did you get that feeling?
Yeah,
About
the sense
a week.
of dread.
Yes. Yeah, it was a feeling. Knowing what I know now, it was a feeling that I would never want again, but it's a feeling you want again, because I knew that it was. It's kind of like this.
You want that warning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's that
it
warning
was.
you want.
Your angels will make you feel, or guides will make you feel very strongly when you're going
To pay
into
attention.
danger.
Yeah, and then little things would happen here and there. And our department was only 16 members of men and women, and so it was a tight family. It wasn't a big city, so a lot of the people within the department, they kind of were picking up on some of the weird things that were happening.
Sure, yeah, people talk inside,
Right, but they were more accepting, I think, of this thing. I mean, there was a couple guys that were a little bit hardcore, but I I was very introverted. I went in, I did my job. I retired a decorated police officer. I did major cases in there, so I think I got a lot of respect from that.
Right.
But this was just growing on the side.
The fact that you weren't pushing it, I think, though, made a big difference, though. Because in human nature, we don't like to be pushed into doing anything or being forced into anything.
Or like a show off or something, right?
Yeah. So I think the fact that, like you didn't push those, so it's like, okay, people made their own decision on their own terms, what they were okay with doing their own time.
But you were also trying to figure out what was going on.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the incident that really just blew this thing right out of the water was a domestic. A wife, a fiance, had been physically assaulted, and I went into the house with a buddy of mine. He's a Bronze Star recipient. He's a hero. He's a war hero. He's a good friend of mine, 20-year military vet. He has his stuff together, and we went into the house, and we should have known better. One should have had lethal, and one should have had less lethal. We made a mistake that day. But in going to the house, he gets into the bedroom. He kicked the door in. It was a guy.
So you had less lethal, right?
We both had less lethal. We had what's called a taser.
Right.
So when we get into the bedroom, the fiance, the male, was intoxicated on the bed, and my buddy went into the room, and when I walked across the threshold of the bedroom, out comes a handgun right at me.
Oh, the suspect
Oh, yeah.
pulled out a gun?
Right at me. And I dove to the floor to transition to my firearm, and I'm thinking I'm going to get shot. I mean, there's no way around it. And I heard the taser makes like a noise, which was the other police officer hitting with the taser. And then what ended up happening there, I went to try to grab the guy to put him into handcuffs, and I got electrocuted up to my elbow. Oof. At what point he had to turn the taser off, and then the guy grabbed the gun with his finger on the trigger to handgun, and it's an all-out wrestling match. So what happened, we finally were able to arrest the guy and get him into a hospital because he wanted to hurt himself. And what was very simple to me on the job became kind of hard, so I took a few months off, which was not a light choice that I made.
Right. It seems like other officers, when you have certain situations like that, they do need to step back sometimes.
Yeah,
but
some do and some don't.
But there's old school, new school. And old school, when I come on old school, I don't know if it's really it's kind of frowned upon, because
suck it up, right?
Yeah, because in my career, I've seen a lot of things. You suck it up and move on. That's what you did back then. And so I took a few months off to kind of just get grounded again.
With mediumship abilities, what happens too is you absorb some of the emotions of everything that's going on at the scene. It's very hard not to.
Right.
And as a policeman, you're not supposed to.
Right.
But you didn't know that at that point is when you knew you weren't good with what happened. You weren't comfortable.
Right. It's like a friend of mine, Rita Berkowitz, told me, you've been taught to be something you're not for 20-something years.
Right.
You're not.
Yeah.
You're not this.
Right.
My father retired from the military. He was more this paramilitary. I was always this kind of the sensitive kid. I wasn't really that. But when I was out of work for a few months, I mean, it was just out of control. I was seeing faces at night. I mean, it would come right to me. I didn't even know who these people were. Just all sorts of phone things going off, and it just exploded from there.
But it sounds like you didn't have anybody to explain anything to you at that time.
Perfect lead into the next part here. You're right on the money. So,
and we can understand this because we've done mediumship, and we know that certain times during your life, your gifts can just explode on you after like a preceding event happens.
Something like catalyst of it.
That is so well said. And so my lifesaver is Joanne Gerber. I just went to a show in Connecticut, and I really don't know anything about it, but I couldn't get enough books on the metaphysics.
Right.
I would read a book, I'd want 10 more.
Right.
So I went to a show that Joanne was doing in Connecticut, and it was like a 2-hour event, and at the very end, she walks back up to the front, and then she said, okay, and she turned around, she said, I have a little boy who was involved in a house fire. Well, she said, a little boy who crossed about 5 years old, and can anyone relate to that? So I raised my hand. And she told me things that day that there's no way she would have known. I mean, I didn't even know who Joanne Gerber was.
Right.
After this whole thing, I mean, she told me everything about the house fire. And at the very end, I went up to talk to her, and she asked me for, pretty much I was going to come in and do a reading with her, and what she ended up blessing me with was calling me at my house which I thought was very unusual. I think it's very unusual now knowing what I know.
Right.
And she called me at my house and she said, listen, for all you've done for people, I want to tell you what's going on with you. And I want to put you in touch with, one was John Holland, and one was Chuck Bergman, who I really hit it off with Chuck Bergman because he's known as a psychic cop. He was a retired police officer.
Yeah.
And he just, between Joanne and I met Rita Bergwich through Joanne. So I had the grounding now of I could ask. It was almost like a gift, and then I met Sandra Champlain in the middle of this nowhere. So I'm meeting all these people, not knowing why I'm meeting these people.
Right. And then you and I meet.
Which
on a meeting online with people all over the world.
But the interesting thing with that was I kept getting this feeling I needed to write a book, and no matter what I did, I'll pop something about writing a book. I pulled a book out of a bookstore. This is how bizarre things were getting with me. And just interested in a book, and out pops this bookmark, which wasn't even visible in the book, and I pick up the bookmark, and the bookmark's how to write a book. So it was just nonstop until I meet Joe, and little I know, I said, oh, he's got a Massachusetts accent, because it's for people from all over the world.
Yeah, people, Australia, Germany, everyone was on there.
The timing of me meeting Joe, and then him being like best mans with Chuck and being good friends with you, was just bizarre. The whole thing is just bizarre.
Yeah, when he started saying, you know Chuck Bergman? I was like, yeah, I was the best man at his wedding.
It's just like you can't make any of this stuff up.
No, you can't. No. And there's no such thing as coincidence either. That's what
Right.
Yeah,
you do this stuff,
spirit
you
really
realize.
knows what it's doing when they
Before
they
we even know
weave
what's going on.
You started out with what looked like a puzzle, and spirit starts bringing pieces to you.
Right.
And it's up to you to look at the pieces and see what you want to do with them.
And that's the process of this book, The Path. It's a perfect name for it because it's your kind of unfoldment. And like I said to you earlier, I said, we don't know how necessarily it's going to, what's going to end up, but it's fun to watch.
Right, and I ended up going to a show with Maureen Hancock, phenomenal medium, and she called me up on stage, who lost a little boy, same thing, called myself and my mother up on the stage, and told me a lot, everything that Joanne had said, but a little bit more. She actually told me his name, and my coworker in the audience, another police officer, I think she almost fell over in her seat. But it's hugs from heaven from Maureen. So she came to give me a hug, and she stepped back and she said, you're very aware. Do you know what that means? And I looked at her and she said, things are going on all around you and you're aware that things are going on around. And I had had a dream the night before of a woman telling me this. But the crazy thing is I went to the wrong hotel. The whole thing was just, you can't make any of this stuff up.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It kind of just flows as it plays out. And meanwhile, you're just kind of like riding it as it goes along, trying to figure out what's going on. And you took great notes of all these things that happened to you, these little things that you've added to the book.
So why the boy? Why the path? Because Maureen says to me, he's always with you, and he's very aware you were there when he crossed over, and he was thanking me for being there. And it's almost like he's like my guardian angel, who's with me. It's almost mind blowing to think that maybe before we came here, we had this. I still have this gut feeling about that we have an agreement that this is how it's supposed to be. This book has nothing to do with me. This has to do with awareness. That people walk around and they're so aloof with things, and it's not. It's if people just would open up and just be aware of the things that people, because the spirit was always trying to get a hold of us all the time.
And sometimes they have to slap us in the face, and like in your particular situation, you had to have a gun pulled on you just to get you over that edge of all these things aren't not necessarily coincidences. They're actually playing out like supposedly maybe they're supposed to play out.
And that's another thing Rita said to me, that if you don't pay attention, you're going to get hit by a 2x4 until you pay attention.
Right, and they've done. We know that through our development.
What happens is that we get so programmed for so long that we don't see the signs that we're born to recognize. And we do map our lives to some extent, though. There's free will thrown in there too, though, so not everything's mapped out. But it's like that's where all the wrenches come in. It's like, okay, when you get off the path too much, it's going to bring your spirit's going to bring you back to where you need to be going, what direction you need to be going in, and that's just what happened.
And not everybody has this dramatic an awakening, or this dramatic a calling towards writing a book and doing mediumship with others. they get much softer and milder kind of awakenings. But the one thing they learn is that they're not alone. There's a spirit world reaching out to help us.
Everyone.
Yeah, from spirit loved ones to different, depending on your belief, ascended masters, angels,
Guardian angels.
you know,
Yeah.
they're all there.
And
Helping us.
And our natural psychic abilities that everyone has is just kind of a way of contacting,
Yeah.
you know, some of these spiritual, you know, selves, higher selves.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have to be, and in Brian's case, he just, you know, he took good notes and kind of follows it.
But when I came back to work, all this stuff I brought with me, and things were happening at work that I end up in a chief's office behind closed doors wanting to know why I knew certain things. Or even a good friend of mine, I love him, he's a healthy skeptic. And one night we're sitting here talking for about a half hour. My phone is on a table. In the middle of the night, my phone starts ringing. And it's a doctor's office of a doctor that he's going to see a week down the road for some serious health issues I had no idea about. And he went out and almost turned sheet white, and I didn't have anything to do with the phone. A lot of things like that were going on at work.
And the phone was at the doctor's office, or the number just showed up on your phone. Yeah, they know how to manipulate technology and cell
the
phones.
electronics,
And maybe your friend needed some support, and that's why.
So how much do you believe in coincidences now versus 10 years ago?
I don't believe in any coincidence now. I mean, I think things are where I'm going. I don't know, I mean, things happen for a reason.
So next year we can have you back on for book 2. Brian, the second season.
Yeah, right.
Yes, to
And,
see where you're growing, you know, where you're growing into. I know there's one person we've had on the show that actually assists police finding lost people, children and lost people that have been reported missing and feared, you know, murder or some sort of problems.
Right.
I know she does that, one person.
You know, it's hard because I almost feel like you have to follow your hierarchy, your chain of command within your agency, and some of these higher ups, they don't want you.
They don't.
I was
They
asked,
won't allow
Nope.
intuition, hunches.
Well, I was asked to go help a medium, a woman with an unsolved case out of state, and I asked the chief. He says, absolutely no way. No way I'm letting you go up there. And then I just learned to keep my private life private. It was a learning lesson for me. But there was a lot of cases that were happening that I was picking up on, just a lot of really mind-blowing stuff. And that's
So
kind of
you
what
can't explain logically.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
No,
just kind of
and witnesses to all these things, yeah.
Sometimes you have to talk to the spirits and let them know. They lose sight of the fact that we have to make a living, for instance. They, you know, and you have to let them know that knowing about these things that I can't do anything about is painful for me. You know, give me stuff that I can do something about.
Yeah.
And don't let me know the other stuff.
Well, I think that's a big thing about writing the book too, because it puts out there that Brian, in a occupation such as police officer and stuff, he's coming forth with all this great, his development and stuff, and it shows other people that, they might be going through something, and that they're not alone. That it's happening to other people, and you're not going crazy.
Yeah.
It became hard when I came back because I was picking up on. I remember going to check welfare call, and I'm halfway up a driveway, so I turn around hysterically crying. I'm turning around the driveway crying hysterically. I don't want my coworkers to see this. I get up there. The guy had said that he didn't pick up the phone because his wife was trying to get a hold of him, and his phone was on a boat. He's working doing lawn work. So I pulled the gentleman aside and I said, "Listen, maybe I'm crazy, but I'm just hysterically crying in the driveway, and I think this is you." And then he hysterically started crying and said that's what was going on. So I was picking up on him. So.
Yeah, that can get overwhelming. So, are you almost done with this book?
Probably about 85% done with it, yeah.
It'll be done by the fall,
Yeah,
late fall.
absolutely,
Like
yeah.
Thanksgiving or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So the name is The Path, and it's Brian Flanagan's story.
And if we need to reach you, is there
There's
a way to reach you?
Yep, the website
website?
will be Brian F. Flanagan. Is that your middle initial?
It is.
Yeah, brianfflanagan.com.
Okay,
And you
that's
can read all
good.
about his backstory.
Yeah, we've just about approached the end of the show, and I want to thank all who've tuned in, and I want to thank my co-host, Kathy, and my guest co-host, Joe,
Thank you.
and Brian Flanagan for being on the show, especially as a last-minute guest. We decided to import you instead
It's all
of
good.
just having our buddy Joe on.
It's nice to know that you're not alone, though, huh?
Yeah, that's a very,
I can't wait
Beautiful
for
thing.
the rest of the story.
yeah, to, you know.
Glad it's
Yeah,
not
you-
me.
do you, do you
I'm just
have
kidding.
do you have any idea of where you're going or where you would like to go? Because you can ask for where you would like to go.
You mean as far as career-wise, or as far as, I just want people to be aware that, I'm a police officer. I want people to be aware that it's okay to, trust and be aware of things.
In your job, that's a hard thing. You have to
Yeah,
trust
yeah.
your partner
Yes.
and be suspicious of everyone else. It's a hard thing.
Yeah.
It's a tough job, though, with what you guys see every day. Never mind, though, throwing this into the mix.
Right.
But you
right.
get
You're on the front line.
you get to walk in somebody else's shoes sometimes. And
I wouldn't change any of it for the world, though.
yeah,
None of it. So, there's an awful lot of people I helped. I wouldn't change it for the world.
yeah,
It's
So.
nice knowing that at the end of the day, though, that you can actually help people with what you do.
yeah.
Right.
And
Empowering.
I'm hearing you're nowhere near finished.
Oh, I know that too. I know. I keep telling them that.
There.
I'm like, wow, ooh. And I'm just like,
And I get my information from very good sources.
Well, that's good.
so not only do you have a lot of great stories in this book, but you're going to have a lot of great more adventures going
we
on.
probably should book you for next year.
Yep.
Okay.
So
How
any
are we
good-
standing?
So
One.
do you got any quick
Any
stories
last
of
minute
it? Yeah.
things you would like to tell the audience?
Boy, there's so many things that happen at work. It's just, I think for me, the pinnacle of getting called into the chief's office and having me shut the door, and then you're like, what did I do? And he wants to know, there was a state law change, and I kept saying, this is going to affect our policies and how we handle things, and I interrupted a meeting, boom, out the door we go for that same thing. Come back, and then there's some funny stories in here. I end up in the chief's office of why. I'm just like, I don't know, lucky guesses?
How did you know?
How did I know? Yeah, how did I know?
That's a tough question to answer.
Right. You get blamed for stuff that didn't,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all good, right?
it is.
yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So BrianFFlanagan.com is the website for
Yes.
more
Brian
information?
F. Flanagan.
Okay.
Flanagan. Okay. No, Brian Capital and F and Flanagan Capital. Okay.
It doesn't make any
Doesn't
difference. You can do it
matter.
lowercase. It's
Oh,
just
it doesn't
Brian
matter.
F. Yep,
Okay.
Flanagan.com. And the book's called The Path.
The pass.
And you'll be able to get it on Amazon and all the other places.
Is it just a hard copy of the book, though? Is it going to be a Kindle version, too?
No, it'll be in Kindle and regular.
Oh, okay. Regular print?
Yeah, regular print and Kindle.
Okay.
Maybe hopefully we can get it to audio
And
too.
the good news is you're going to get it printed. And how many people write books that aren't printed?
Yeah, then we get to that point. Yeah.
So
So that's a blessing.
people will enjoy it.
Spirit worked on that.
Yes, definitely. Oh yeah, that's for another interview.
How to get your book published.
Oh,
Try
my-
and do it yourself or ask Spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us. Please come back. We're going to have a little more of Joe later.
Cup of Joe.